Hey friends, in today's video it's part one of a two-part series on how I use ForeFlight as a low-hour VFR pilot. I've had a lot of requests to make this video and I want to point out a couple things up front before we jump in. This is not an all-inclusive ForeFlight tutorial. There are many of those available on YouTube, both from ForeFlight's channel and also other users. This is more of an overview of some of my favorite features and uses for ForeFlight as a VFR pilot. So let's jump in and get started. First of all, you'll have to have added an airplane that you're going to fly in the aircraft section. And here we've got selected November 3852 Lima, which is the airplane that I fly. You can specify some various parameters about the aircraft, its colors, where it's based, whether airspeed should be miles per hour or knots, glide ratio and speed of the airplane, what cruising altitude do you want to set as your default when you're planning a new flight, maximum ceiling, fuel units, start, taxi, and takeoff fuel, and then some information, about the equipment and how the airplane is equipped. The most powerful feature to me of ForeFlight's planning for aircraft is in the performance profiles section. In here, you'll see I have a list of profiles that I've created, 9 of them so far for various flight altitudes. Now, this data can be found in your POH for your specific airplane, and you'll be using the cruise and the climb performance charts within your POH to help fill these out. So let's just take a minute and look at our default profile that I've created for 5,000 feet at 2,450 RPM. In here, we've specified some specific parameters about our airplane, the speed at which we'll cruise, our climb burn per hour, and our climb rate. And then based on our POH cruise data, at that altitude and that RPM setting leaned correctly, we can expect 121 miles per hour true airspeed, burning 7.5 gallons per hour. And then you fill in some descent profile information as well. And what this will do when you're flight planning in ForeFlight, it'll use these performance calculations, and based on your cruise altitude, et cetera, to give you fuel performance calculations and some other things, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So set up your airplane, reference your POH, and set up a couple of performance profiles based on altitudes that you'll be flying at for your first couple of flights. And of course, you can store multiple aircraft in your ForeFlight app as well, which is great if you fly more than one airplane. Another good kind of basic setup item within ForeFlight is the weight and balance section. And again, this can be set up for multiple airplanes. And you'll use the weight and balance document, the current weight and balance document for your airplane, to find the basic numbers that you need to apply in here, which includes what kind of fuel type the airplane uses, the individual stations and their locations within each airplane, and then basic information on the empty weight, CG, and moment of the airplane, as well as weight limits for the plane. Once that's configured initially in ForeFlight, in the load section is where you can do a weight and balance calculation for each flight that you'll take subsequently once it's set up. So let's go ahead and do one for a mock flight that I'm going to take for part 2 of this, actually a real flight that I'm going to take for part 2 of this series. So I'll put my weight in there. I won't have a co-pilot with me on this trip, so I'll just put, we'll say I'll have 5 pounds worth of stuff maybe in the co-pilot seat. When we leave here, we're going to have 20 gallons of fuel in the airplane, and we're going to burn, let's just say for now, 4 gallons. We'll calculate that later. In the back seats, I'll have nothing in one passenger seat, and let's say I'll have my flight bag, maybe weighs 10 pounds in the other seat, and there'll be like 15 pounds worth of stuff in the baggage compartment. So once you've input that information into ForeFlight, it will show you your weight and balance. So our takeoff weight is going to be 1758.1, and we'll land at 1734. It has a logbook. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through this feature today, but I use ForeFlight as my logbook. I like it because it also includes flight tracks as well, that it tracks if you've got an appropriate GPS tied to your iPad, either a Stratix or Stratus unit, or you have a cellular enabled iPad that has a GPS built in. It can use that for position tracking and track logging as well. Let's talk a little bit about the flight planning component now of ForeFlight, which is certainly one that is used very regularly in my workflow. So we can come down here to the Flights tab, and let's go ahead and create a new flight together. And let's say we're going to take this flight, let's just say we'll do this on Sunday at 10 a.m. So you can pick your estimated departure time, and that's important because it will use either historical weather to predict the weather if the flight date is too far out, or if you're close enough to your flight, it'll use real forecast weather to help with this planning portion. So we'll pick our takeoff time, and we're going to fly from 4 Golf 7. And we're going to fly to Allegheny County Airport, just south of Pittsburgh. So KAGC is our destination. And then it pre-populates the route, and the very first thing I like to do is scroll down to the cruise altitude section and click it, and we're going to be VFR easterly. And I like to do this because look at the wind table that it shows you and helps you select your best cruise altitude for the flight based on winds. There'll be more factors that we'll take into account here shortly. 3,500 feet is the what it has selected for me, but I'm going to go ahead and change it to 5,500 just because I like a little bit more of altitude. It's a half a gallon more fuel and 1 more minute to get there. So I've selected 5,500. At that point, I can come to my performance profiles, and do I have a 5,500 that's matched? I don't. We'll use the 5,000 at 2450 RPM performance profile, which means I'll burn 5.9 gallons. The flight will take 28 minutes to go 55 miles with a 28 knot tailwind at 5,500. So that's kind of the basic for the flight. So now what I like to do at this point is click the button in the top right corner and send this flight to the map view so we can take a little closer look at it here on the map view. This is when we could start to make some decisions on flight planning like you would. Routes, if this was a longer flight, we might be considering some nav aids along the way. We might want to use some VOR stations to navigate. But because this is such a short flight and it looks like I can go direct without any airspace considerations, except here at the very end, Pittsburgh's class Bravo starts at 4,000 feet through here, so I'll have to have descended below 4,000 or have a Bravo clearance from approach to enter there at that airspace. So I like that straight route. I'm going to come up to the top screen now and hit the flight plan button, and I want to view the profile view of my flight. And this helps me get a good look at the terrain along my route of flight, and also make some decisions on if I'm happy with the cruise altitude that I've selected based on terrain clearance. And in this case, I certainly am. It looks like we're going to have about 3,500 feet of clearance the entire route, which is great. It should give us a little bit of a bigger glide range, a good margin of safety. So I'm happy with the cruise altitude that I've selected for my flight. So at that point, you could take a look at the nav log, which in this case is very easy. It shows us one leg. If we had multiple legs, which we'll do a longer flight plan in another video, we could take a look at that here. So now that my flight is planned and I know I'm going to burn, let's call it 6 gallons of fuel, I might go back to the flight page. I might go back to the weight and balance section. And just for fun, I'll go ahead and modify that I'm going to burn 6 gallons in flight so that I have an accurate representation of my weight and balance. All right, so we have planned our flight now. It's a very short flight to Allegheny County. If I was closer, this would be a little more accurate, but I'll go ahead and demonstrate now the weather briefing portion of ForeFlight, which is another very powerful tool. I'll click the briefing tab, and it's going to connect to the internet, propagate my flight plan, and then pull some weather data based on that. So first it'll show me a surface analysis chart. This is a current chart. So if I click next, I'll see some METARs. These are also current METARs of airports along the route. Not real helpful since this flight was scheduled 4 days out. So we'll go ahead and go to PIREPs. Also, these are current PIREPs, so not super helpful when you're planning a flight 4 days out. These are now TAFs. Also, you'd see TAFs for all of the areas along your route of flight. It would highlight each TAF at each point for the current time you'd be passing that point in flight. Again, we're a few days out, so this isn't super helpful. Same thing with the wind chart for along your route of flight, and a vertical cross section, which is tremendously helpful, that will show you wind speed and direction along your vertical profile of flight. Here's our winds aloft table for our positions along our route of flight. All of the NOTAMs, these are departure NOTAMs. These are NOTAMs at our destination airport, NOTAMs en route, communication NOTAMs. These are all very important to read, and that would be considered a briefing that you could go through for your route of flight. One very important thing that I always like to do in ForeFlight after I've planned before I depart, because I do not have a cellular enabled device, plus, a lot of times data service is not available in flight, is to hit this pack button. And what this is going to do is take a ring around your route, and it's going to download all of the current weather, TFRs, fuel prices, NOTAMs, all of the data relevant to your flight profile to the iPad directly, so that while you're in flight, you have all that data at its current form. I always pack right before leaving, so it's the very last thing I do that I have the most current data available. All right, let's take a minute to talk about another great ForeFlight feature called checklists. This is something you'll use in the airplane, certainly, but you'll configure ahead of time. They have some default checklists built in, but you can certainly modify all of these. So here I have all of my checklists for 3852 Lima, from pre-flight, starting engine, all of the normal ones, as well as abnormal checklists for various procedures that are not common, and our emergency checklists. What I like about this is my iPad is always displayed in front of me. I never have to fumble around digging through the door pocket for paper checklists. These are always available to me on my iPad in flight, right in front of me on the yoke. So I strongly encourage you to modify checklists within ForeFlight to match the checklists for your aircraft, and save yourself the step of pulling up the paper while you're in flight. Another great section here is the document section. ForeFlight allows you to import your own documents. So you can see here, I've done this for the POH for 3852 Lima. I have an actual PDF copy of the POH inside of ForeFlight, so I don't have to dig for the paper copies of that. But additionally, beyond your own uploaded documents, there are many documents available from the FAA, chart supplements, tax, various charts that you may need. There's the ACS. Here's all the FAR aims, chart supplements, and you can visit the FAA and find all of the charts that you may be interested in and download them to your iPad and have them in ForeFlight. All right, as we move on to configuration of the app now, one of the things we're going to want to do before getting in the airplane to fly is configure our map settings. There are a handful of ways we can do that. One of the things are the layers of the map. So under the drop-down menu in the top left-hand corner of the screen, on the left side are the various map layers that are available. Aeronautical map is good. That's ForeFlight's base map with a lot of their icon and symbology and things. So I typically use aeronautical and a US VFR sectional as my two map layers on the left. And on the right-hand side, these are the various overlays that you can put over your base map layers. Now, these change frequently, and in fact, depending on the flight condition or the stage of flight or other variables while in flight, I'll change these on the fly. Kind of a good base, though, would be at the top, I'll use radar or hazard advisor in a lot of cases that will show me various obstacles and hazards. Traffic layer is almost always on, and when you're not connected to an ADS-B end device on your iPad, the traffic targets that are showing up on the map now are delivered over the internet. So these are internet delivered traffic targets that we're seeing currently. AirMet, SIGMETs, and center weather advisories, TFRs can be on all the time. And then the next subsection here in the drop-down list are kind of interesting. You can go flight category of airports, so it'll show the airports as either red, blue, or green, or kind of a magenta color, depending on the flight category. So that's kind of cool. Surface winds, you can see at various airports that are reporting such. You'll get reports of surface winds, winds aloft, dew point spread, temperature at the various airports. You can see like it's showing 16 degrees Celsius at Clarksburg. Visibility at the airport, ceiling, and sky coverage. So at a glance, you can see those things. Then you have the option for PIREPs and lightning, and then the very bottom, you can see fuel prices at airports if that's your preference, waypoints that you've added, and obstacles that kind of show up on the chart as well. So those are adjustable in flight. Obviously, you can change them as conditions dictate. The settings icon at the top of the screen as you work your way across give you some options on just the look and feel of the app. You can invert the screen colors if you prefer to have a darker style map. You can do that. You can pick how you'd like your terrain to be shown. What do you want to see about the airports, or what types of airports? Do you want to see heliports and seaplane bases? Do you want to see private airports? Airspace definitions. You have sections in here that you can control how you want to see airspace. There's a lot of customization that can be done in here. And one of the biggest debates probably on the entire internet is as it relates to how you view ForeFlight on a moving map. North up, track up centered, or track up forward. I have become a north up adopter. It just makes it easy to glance for me when I see my airplane icon on the screen compared to a landmark or an airport, to be able to pick my position, how many miles I am, and what direction generally from that waypoint I am. So I have become a north up proponent in this case. And there's some other more detailed things in the settings there that we won't get into. Continuing to move across the top of the map now, you'll see you have an icon. This middle one here is for if you have an AHRS reporting device that will give you attitude information. You have a kind of a backup attitude indicator that you can use within ForeFlight. The next button across shows the little menu across the bottom of the screen. We'll talk about that here in just a moment as well. And then there's a favorites and recents button over here if you're looking for a specific thing that you've done recently. So let's talk briefly about the menu bar across the bottom of the page, of the bottom of the map. This is fully customizable, and as you can see across the bottom left to right, I've currently got distance to next waypoint, estimated time en route to the next waypoint, ground speed, ETA at our destination, descent to destination, and accuracy. So these are customizable. We'll talk more about them in flight, but you can hold down on the bottom row and you can see all of the available instruments that you can apply across the bottom. We'll get into that more in detail at a later time as well. A couple of things you can do with the map kind of for pre-flighting. So if we know this flight, for instance, is going to take us from Fairmont to Allegheny County, you can get all the stuff you normally can get on a sectional chart, obviously, frequencies, altitude of the field, longest runway, various things of that nature. But you can also click on the airport. And in here, you will see we can find all of this information as well, spelled out. Frequencies, phone numbers. We've got a weather tab here where we can see their current METAR TAF, winds aloft reported there. Runway information. It'll also show you the current favored best winds runway. Procedures are available here for the airport. So you've got your FAA airport diagram. I'm sorry, that's the ForeFlight airport diagram. There will be an FAA airport diagram, I believe, as well for this airport. All of the documents that you might need for approaches if you're flying some instrument approaches, minimums, land and hold short instructions, and any NOTAMs that are applicable here to the airport are listed right here in ForeFlight as well. All right, in episode 2, we'll be talking more about how we use ForeFlight in flight, in the airplane, from the time we get in and do our checklists before taking off, the various stages of a VFR flight. We'll have about a 30-minute flight to use all the features. We'll land at Allegheny County, taxi back and take off again and come home, and you'll get to see kind of every step of what I think is the best usage of ForeFlight in flight. So I hope this was helpful, kind of a perspective from a low-hour VFR pilot and the kind of things I like to use ForeFlight. Be sure to subscribe, like this video if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and also would encourage you to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/midlifepilot for a ton of bonus content and other perks available there exclusively for our patrons. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you real soon.